order. The Honourable the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as promised yesterday, I am rising to make a more structured intervention on the question of privilege raised by the NDP member for London Fanshawe. And I agree wholeheartedly with all my Conservative colleagues who have already arisen on this matter. There is no question of privilege here whatsoever concerning the behaviour of the official opposition. If anything, Madam Speaker, the actual contempt here was when the NDP Deputy House Leader stormed up the aisle in a very physically and demonstrative and verbally aggressive fashion to confront the chair. She is quickly joined by the NDP member for Edmonton-Griesbach. That was, of course, in plain view of anyone watching the television feed of Thursday evening's proceedings of the House. She also confessed to it in her intervention Friday afternoon. Quote, "After we adjourned, I approached the chair to ask how this could have been allowed." That's a very polite way of putting it, Madam Speaker. If you look at the tape, the camera was still running after the Speaker had adjourned the House, and you can see the member in question, the NDP member, walking up very aggressively, waving wildly, pointing fingers, and basically yelling and admonishing the Speaker. Standing Order 16.4 instructs us that, quote, "When the House adjourns, members shall keep their seats until the Speaker has left the chair." That clearly didn't happen. If anything, the NDP Deputy House Leader's conduct reminded me of the incident described at footnote 345 on page 645 of House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition. Quote, "Perhaps the worst scene in modern times occurred in 1980 when closure was moved on a motion to establish a committee to study a constitutional resolution. Several members, angered by the closure motion, stormed the chair, demanding to be heard. The resulting disorder on the floor of the House led to the entrance behind the curtains of members of the protective staff on the orders of the Sergeant at Arms." End quote. Now, thankfully, it didn't quite get that far. We didn't need armed police in here to address the NDP's chaos and disorder, but the Deputy Sergeant at Arms did have to escort physically the NDP Deputy House Leader away from the Conservative benches after her unprofessional, erratic, and unhinged attack on several Conservative MPs who, in compliance with the standing order, had remained seated and remained calm. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, if anything gives rise, Madam Speaker, if anything gives rise to a contempt, it is the storming of the chair by the NDP House Leader. Had Conservatives wanted to, we could have raised our own question of privilege, which I believe would have been a slam dunk for securing a prima facie ruling from the chair. But Conservatives believe that questions of privilege should be raised to address serious violations of the authority and dignity of Parliament, not to score cheap political points to deflect from a given party's strategic errors. And that is what I believe is behind the NDP Deputy House Leader's question of privilege. And if you'll grant me a little bit of latitude, I do believe that motive and context matters in this. The NDP is suffering. And what we are seeing is the lashing out of emotions that their predicament has built up. For 3 years, the NDP was in a coalition arrangement with this Liberal Prime Minister, aiding and abetting his disastrous policies for Canada, which has Canadians suffering. And
of a point of order on the point of order. Just. So again, so there is a point of order already on the floor, so we're going to allow this point of order to end, and then we'll go to the honourable member for New Westminster, Bernie V, who's rising on on the same point of order, from what I can gather. And I do want to indicate, if the honourable member is providing context to the event that actually happened, particular to that event, then that is acceptable. If it's other stuff that wants to debate, then I would say that that's not admissible. So the Honourable Deputy House Leader, no, the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Out of respect for you, Madam Speaker, I will quickly move through this part. I will just point out that in the NDP's interventions on this, they had no problem using the House's time to come up with all kinds of wild theories and conjecture about motivations or even fabrications of what was going on. But I will heed what you have said and quickly just point out that clearly the NDP were frustrated that night. And I believe what happened was they saw an opportunity to deflect and distract from their decision to No. This is what happened Thursday night. That they seized an opportunity to try to deflect from their own strategic error. That being said, Canadians are smart and recognize what they're seeing, and the NDP knows this. All this happened during Thursday night's votes. All of that happened during Thursday night's vote was that 100 or so Conservative MPs, proud to be here to vote on behalf of their constituents, were voicing their opinion about the NDP's voting. And if you actually watch the video of the vote, Madam Speaker, you'll see the 4 or 5 NDP members who were voting physically in the House actually reacted in a playful and good-humoured way, like gesturing that they couldn't hear jokingly what the Conservative colleagues were saying. Not that they couldn't hear the chair or the vote callers. They were actually looking at our members, joking around and playing it up for the cameras. In the moment, that is how those MPs interpreted the noise that was coming from down the hall. You can actually see the NDP member for Port Moody Coquitlam jokingly asking Conservative members to speak up because she was pretending that she couldn't hear them. That was the flavor. That is visible on the cameras. That is without debate. That's not my opinion. That is what you will see if you look at the video from that evening. Now, I do believe that all that might have drawn a brief intervention from the chair, and the House moved on, as it naturally would. And it is the Speaker's job to enforce decorum and enforce the rules and apply them when he or she believes that it is getting to the point of being disruptive. And Conservative members heeded the call of the chair, and the House moved on as it would. As for specific allegations which were made, I understand, though that I have it on very good authority, Madam Speaker, that we can categorically reject the NDP's defamatory, spurious, and completely unfounded allegations of anyone being intoxicated. And if you really want to question, or if you really take a look at the validity of those allegations, the 2 members who the NDP accused in this chamber, that was again caught on video, are 2 members who are non-drinkers.
They do not drink.
And it's not only insulting to them, but it's incredibly dangerous that somebody can use the parliamentary privilege, like the NDP House Leader has done, to make these unfounded and baseless accusations, which now have gone out into social media that have really damaged members' reputations without any substantiation at all. That is really a problem. And if you look at the behavior of members that evening, if you want to question who might have been intoxicated, certainly weren't Conservative members, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, the NDP House Leader made an intervention where he asserted a number of those outrageous...
Someone has the floor, and I think that it's very inappropriate for others to be yelling out while someone else has the floor. The other thing I just want to indicate is that, you know, there may be all kinds of interpretation, but I think that if the honourable member wants to just put his case forward, I think that it's very difficult to interpret what somebody else was actually doing. So again, if the honourable member can wrap it up, the honourable official opposition official opposition House Leader.
I agree with you, Madam Speaker. But we find ourselves in this position because that is exactly what the NDP have done with these outrageous and baseless accusations. I think it's only fair and only just that after making these kinds of allegations, that the official opposition is allowed to not only defend ourselves and our integrity, but to put the actual facts of the matter before the chair, if the chair is going to rule on this. Now, my NDP counterpart also claimed that pages were withdrawn from the opposition lobby because of what he alleged was the conduct of Conservative MPs. Now, first of all, I was briefed by a representative of the House administration relating to the PAGE program, and was informed that the initiation, the baseline issue that led ultimately to a decision being made was actually have happened earlier and was completely unrelated to behavior in the lobby, but an administrative issue within the PAGE program itself. I can also say that during the evening, there were requests from one side to the other, from the NDP lobby, to turn the volume down on the television that was on. A request that was accommodated. But this is in stark contrast to the actions of NDP members that evening. I would also point out that I've been in this place a long time, Madam Speaker, on both sides of the House. I've been in a situation where I've shared opposition lobbies with the NDP. They are often gathered together having a jovial time, just as Conservatives were that evening. I've heard them playing guitars and leading each other in songs. That is something that happens from time to time on late night sittings, and both parties usually just accommodate each other when they're doing that. We have to share the same space, we try to stay out of each other's way, and this all has come at us as a complete shock to Conservative staff and Conservative MPs who viewed the events of that evening of exactly that. Our MPs in our corner of the lobby enjoying the evening, and knowing that we're about to come in, vote on a confidence matter, and having a playful time in the House of Commons, chirping the NDP who are voting on another side of the issue, which they do from time to, not just from time to time, all the time, Madam Speaker. And they are now just being selectively sanctimonious. That being said, let me talk a little bit about the NDP members' conduct in the House. We saw unhinged conduct directed at the Conservative lobby coordinator by the NDP member for Vancouver East. Not once, but on 2 occasions Thursday night, she used profane language and likened him to a certain body part. On the second occasion, an NDP staffer had to physically come between her and the staffer in question, much like how the Deputy Sergeant at Arms had to direct the NDP Deputy House Leader away from the Conservatives she was harassing, as seen on the video which hundreds of thousands of Canadians have witnessed so far. That interaction between the NDP member and the Conservative staff was an exercise of a position of power to assert authority over and to bully an employee. There are witnesses to this conduct, as well as, I understand, a video, which I expect will be heard in other forums. Earlier in the evening, the honourable member, the Conservative member for St. Albert, Edmonton, was attempting to record a message for his constituents and Canadians about his work as our Democratic Reform Shadow Minister on Bill C-65, which proposes to delay the fixed date election by a week in order to secure the pensions of 28 Liberal and NDP MPs. Okay, well, let me get to the part where it's relevant. While attempting to record this video, the member for Edmonton Griesbach engaged in disruptive, harassing, obnoxious, and nuisance behavior directed towards my colleague and his work, trying to derail his ability to record the video. At the end of the night, another NDP MP delivered a bizarre, passive-aggressive rant to a second member of the Conservative staff for the simple courtesy of holding a door which otherwise would have automatically closed in her face. And it hasn't stopped there, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, in the lobby, the former NDP whip gratuitously addressed a gross slur to my Chief of Staff. And I raise this just as another example of the bizarre, weird, unhinged pattern of behavior which NDP members of Parliament are exhibiting around the parliamentary precinct. So if we're going to ask why pages were asked to remove the lobby, let's look at the behavior of the NDP MPs contributing to that feeling they might have had in their workspace. So what is unusual here is that the NDP House Leader, whose conduct Thursday night was shameful, as seen on Parleview and in other videos published on social media, is trying to lead the charge for parliamentary civility and decorum. In June, she wrote to all MPs inviting us to sign a so-called pledge with 4 branches. Firstly, she wants MPs to pledge to, quote, support each other and call out abuse and harassment when we see it or experience it. Well, that's exactly what we're doing now about the excessive toxic behavior on open display by New Democrats. Secondly, MPs were asked to pledge to, quote, call on all our allies to stand with us to support women in office and call out all forms of abuse.
Honourable member is going on about other stuff that's not actually related to the matter at hand, to the situation that happened. It's more debate, before it can be a debate, then the honourable the decision has to be made by the Speaker on it. So I would just ask if the honourable member has any additional information he would like to put on record that has to do with that particular evening that hasn't already been raised in the House. The honourable official opposition House Leader.
Well, Madam Speaker, I will just sum up by saying what the NDP have done is they have made baseless and false accusations that damage the reputations of individual members of Parliament. The old saying that a lie goes halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on is very appropriate here, because they can make these allegations, and just by defending ourselves, we are contributing to the propagation of the falsehood. And that puts all members in a very risky behavior. Any one of us could get up at any time and make false accusations about who they saw in the parliamentary dining room bar and what one member said or didn't or did, and not be held to account because the effect of the accusation plants the seed in people's minds. Secondly, the behavior by individual NDP MPs themselves were the cause for the the breakdown in order in the House. And the way they treated the Speaker, someone that they have protected, that they have voted confidence in before, is absolutely shameful, that they would march up the aisle waving and hurling insults and abuse. So I think it's clear, Madam Speaker, if anybody's privileges have been infringed, it is the Conservative MPs who are the subject of baseless allegations. If anybody's workplace was made toxic by behavior, it was Conservative staff in the lobby because of NDP actions. And I think what the proper thing to resolve this right now is for the NDP to withdraw their question of privilege, apologize to the Speaker for their behavior, apologize to the Conservative MPs whose reputations they have slandered, and put this matter to rest. Thank you.
I do have another point of order. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
And thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And all I can say to the official...
This is exactly what we have been seeing over and over again when someone else has the floor. Now, the honourable member rose to raise on the point of order. I told him he had to wait until this one was done. And now I would ask members to please be respectful, and let's hear what the honourable member has to say so we can go on with the business of the day. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I was going to say to my colleague and friend, he's got a great future as a fiction writer ahead of him once he retires from politics. He did not address the question of privilege.
Just want to, so again, you know, there's been indication that there was falsehoods and all of that stuff. I just want to say that I would hope that all members are providing the feedback as they see it, but not trying to implicate others. I think that it's incumbent upon this House to be respectful of each other. We can put forward the views of what has or may have transpired, and that will be a decision that will be made during the decision that will be made by the Speaker. So at this point in time, I'm going to allow the honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby to add any other information that he wishes to add to the debate that is before the House, or not the debate, to the question of privilege. Any other debate will be put over should it be considered a prima facie case. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. 3 points to make. First off, the official opposition House Leader basically rose on a point of order. He didn't address the question of privilege, and I think that's very relevant to the considerations you're going to have, Madam Speaker, and the Speaker is going to have. Secondly, the Speaker apologized for his failure to recognize the member from London Fanshawe, and so it's important that the Speaker rose and apologized. The member from London Fanshawe, the official opposition House Leader, knows this, and that error and omission, I think, is part of his torquing of this question of privilege. Thirdly and finally, I am glad to see Conservatives have finally recognized that the pages had to be withdrawn from the opposition lobby because of safety reasons, and I think that acknowledgement is important for you to consider on this question of privilege moving forward. I won't take any more time, and I certainly won't get into debate. Thank you for a full consideration of this question of privilege. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the same point of order for the point of privilege, the honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Madam Speaker, and my honourable colleague who was speaking, while he was speaking about the very thing that I too witnessed on Thursday while voting, of the member from London Fanshawe who stormed through this House and aggressively accosted many of the members just in the lobby while he was speaking, made a knifing motion toward Conservative staff that she was going to knife us.
So again, you know, the Speaker generally does not rule on what is happening in the lobbies, but I think that there are better ways to address those issues. And as I indicated, I think that it is best just to bring forward the issues that happened here in the House of Commons, and then we'll be able to better determine whether or not the prima facie case has been put forward. I appreciate the honourable member for Vancouver East also on the same point of privilege.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm compelled to rise to share this additional information with you, Madam Speaker. With respect to the vote, the day of the vote, in fact, what had happened, of course, is that my colleague, the member from London Fanshawe, did walk up to the Speaker to raise and to register her concern for not being recognized and not being able to do her job, for the jeering and the loud noises that were coming from the Conservative side that was orchestrated and premeditated to violate the rules of the House, so that the NDP members, when they got up to vote, that I could not hear my name being called, whether or not my vote has been registered, Madam Speaker. I know that was the case for my other colleagues, the NDP colleagues that were in the House that same day. So as a result, my colleague, the member from London Fanshawe, was not able to do her job. Now, afterwards, Madam Speaker, in terms of the filming that had occurred, it's true that in total, there were 5 members in this House from the NDP side, and some of us did walk up to support my colleague, the member from London Fanshawe. Why did we walk up there to support her? Because there were some over 100 Conservative side members on that side that were jeering at her, calling her pathetic, shaming her. And so as we were sitting here watching this, we thought that we should go and stand with her. And yes, and I did make a comment about the Conservatives deliberately violating the rules of the House with the standing order, because they were instructed by their whip staff to actually interrupt the proceedings of the House during the voting process when the NDP members got up to vote. So that's the sum of what had occurred. Madam Speaker.
The honourable member does not have the floor, and he should be very respectful in the House and allow others. This is becoming to be more of more additional information during a debate. Excuse me. Now, if the honourable member does not want to respect what the chair has ordered, then I would ask him to step out. The honourable member for Vancouver East, if she could wrap it up, because from what I can gather, this is additional information. Again, the honourable member, I appreciate that he stepped out. It looks like he's having a hard time controlling himself. The honourable member for Vancouver East, if they could
finish. The member who just walked out of the House, to which you asked for him to respect the rules of the House, just did a gesture towards me in a threatening way. I just want to note that on the record here. Madam Speaker, I will just close with this. That's what happened in that night. And in fact, when I was in the lobby, I thought the lobby smelled like a brewery. That is also a fact, Madam Speaker. So I hope that the truth will prevail, because I know that there's a lot of spinning going on and twisting of the facts. And as is always the case, the bullies always use an aggressive offense as a defense, and that's what we're seeing here from the Conservative side.
I appreciate all of the interventions. Some on all of the testimonial that was provided for this question of privilege were more on the area of debate. And again, I would just want to thank members for their additional information, and we'll set this aside as we we will take it into consideration as the deliberation is being made on this here. Another point of order, the honourable member for Lakeland, yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I'll just add my voice then as a person who was standing right here, which is, as you can see, 8 seats away from where...
As the member's adding her voice, I want to make sure that it is additional information and not a repeat of what has already been said. The honourable member for Lakeland.
I guess if I'm allowed to speak and continue, I'll try to do that. The unique thing would be about my perspective, given that I was standing right here, 8 seats away from where the incident happened. It is categorically false that there were hundreds of Conservative MPs here at that time. That's just not true. Second of all, I was standing right here when the member stormed all the way down here. The poor guy holding this thing, Base, didn't really know what to do. He's standing there like, what's going on? I watched her this many feet away storm all the way down here in very confrontational, aggressive comportment. And I certainly wouldn't be one, to lecture others about decorum when I'm in the course of doing my job as a member of Parliament, standing in my place as an advocate for my constituents. But that is certainly that is certainly a major distinction from storming physically all the way down here, an elevated voice to the Speaker and to all of the pages and everyone all around them. More and more Conservative MPs left the chamber while that was happening. There were Conservatives at the very back who had said, what's going on here? This is adjourned. Let's go. Let's get done. Then they did make accusatory and false accusations of our deputy leader. And then the member for Leeds, Thousand Islands, came over here and sat 8 seats away from me, right there. And I was in his own seat, and I was standing right here. And then at that point, she did come back across here and was joined by at least 3 members from over there who rushed over the table to my male colleague who was sitting down, who walked up and sat down. And then they stood over him aggressively, physically, over the front of the desk with their voices raised, pointing down at him. You can hear me in the video footage that has gone around saying, he's sitting down, he's sitting down. Well, no one in their right mind and seeing eyeballs can actually make the argument that the person who was being a bully and intimidating another was the person sitting in his seat with 3 or 4 others standing over top of him with their voices elevated, pointing down, yelling at like that. There's just no one in their right mind, which is also in video footage, that could be concluded or perceived to be anything other than the members of Parliament who are on their feet, physically and verbally bending over and intimidating the member sitting in his seat. And that is backed up by the comments of the member for Kelowna Lake Country, who sits right beside that member. She, like me, and like, I can't remember. The person, this isn't her actual last name, but Ferrari, I can't remember the name of her thing. Hopefully that's okay, because I'm not saying her actual name. Can't remember her riding name.
Mention the first name or the last name, you're not allowed to say that name. Yes, you did.
It's a different last name.
Peterborough.
Peterborough, so the member for Peterborough. Just as she said, I too have had many professional jobs before I was elected to this place almost a decade ago. And somewhat like the first incident where we all pretended the Prime Minister didn't do what he did, in, our first or second year of being elected here, when he stormed down to that end because he was mad the length the vote was taking, and then our whip, Gord Brown, got frog marched by him down here, but was too much of a gracious man to say anything.
Going into some past information, again, the honourable member, if she has anything else to add, because a lot of what she's indicated has already been raised, and the Speaker was here, so he saw what was going on. He experienced it, and I'm sure that he'll be able to provide more context, and we have lots of videos. So again, if the honourable member can wrap it up, the honourable member Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, and what I dearly hope is that we don't run into a situation where he experienced it differently and we all pretend that what we can't see with our functional brains and our seeing eyeballs is the opposite of what happened. So, like the other member from Peterborough, and like the member for Kelowna Lake Country. Now, these are all tough women. None of us are shrinking violets. Many of us have gone through challenging things in our lives, which actually does include being in unsafe environments and sometimes physically and verbally intimidating situations. I can speak for myself in that regard. It makes me allergic to bullies as an adult. But I would share the comments that they made, that never in my life have I been in a workplace where that kind of thing could happen and where there are no consequences. So, Madam Speaker, I really am looking to hear from what are the consequences for members behaving in a way which is blindingly, obviously, physically and verbally intimidating in a workplace. And also, might I just conclude by saying, this place is one of vigorous debate. It is one where we have a duty to represent our constituents on the most important policy and political decisions that impact every day of their lives. These debates will get hot. these votes will be controversial. There'll be lots of back and forth between all of us. That is the heat of the political frying pan that we all volunteer to jump in. If people can't take it, they should probably get out of it. But I hope that there will be
is really going on to the debate side, and again, the information that has been provided has been already submitted. I appreciate all of the additional input that people have indicated, but for the most part, a lot of this borders is debate. And as I said, the Speaker was here. We've got lots of video to go through, and I'm sure that a decision is forthcoming. The House will now resume with the remaining business under routine proceedings. A point of order, the honourable member again for Lakeland.
Thank you. So the new thing is, though, of course, my very close and direct perspective on everything, so therefore my unique perspective. But the new thing I'm really asking for is what will be the consequences? Well, so hopefully
see that based on the decision that will be rendered. And as we have just witnessed as well, members do get a little hot under the collar sometimes, and sometimes they do things that they may regret later, or you know, that is not acceptable in the House. So I would just ask members to please be respectful of each other.